Om Badram Karanebihi Shruniyama Devaha Badram Pashyema Akshabihi Ryajatraha Sthirairangair Tushtuvam Sastanubihi Vyashema Devahitan Yadayuhu Swastinah Indro Vridrashravah Swastinah Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinah Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swastino बृहस्पतिर्ददातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रसुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्ना अन्यांष्टहस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम् लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाबोधं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So, good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone and Happy New Year. I hope you've had a good time with family and friends over the last couple of weeks. And you're all fully charged up for another 12 months of Upanishad Chintana, Gita recitation. So may our satsang continue for as long as possible. So I'm looking forward to a very productive 2024 from an Upanishad perspective. So today is the 12th session. So thanks to folks who have joined us today. So where were we? Where were we over the last? Now we've been doing Mundaka Upanishad Chintana for about 3 to 4 months now. So let's do a Simha Avalokana Nyaya. Let's, as lions, look back and see what we have done over the last 3 to 4 months. So where does this Upanishad come in the grand scheme of things? We have Dasho Upanishad. We got 10 Upanishad. Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva Veda have got their own Upanishads. Aitreya for Rig Veda. For Yajur Veda, you have two Krishna Yajur Veda and Shukla Yajur Veda. For Shukla Yajur Veda, you have Isa Upanishad or Ishavasya Upanishad. And there is a big Upanishad in Shukla Yajur Veda called Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. In Krishna Yajur Veda, you have Katha Upanishad and Taittiriya Upanishad. Then in Sama Veda, you have Keno Upanishad, which is a small one, and Chandogya Upanishad, which is a big Upanishad. And in Atharvana Veda or Atharva Veda, you have three important Upanishad: Mundaka Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad, and Prashna Upanishad. And by God's grace, over the last 3 to 4 years, we have managed to do some justice to Isha, Katha, Chandogya chapter 6 and Mandukya Upanishad. And currently we are looking at Mundaka Upanishad, which is part of the Atharva Veda or Atharvana Veda. So Mundaka Upanishad, as the name implies, Mundakas, it has 3 Mundakas, Mundaka 1, 2, and 3. And each Mundaka has got 2 Khandas, 1 and 2. So you got 6 Khandas to cover. We have done first Khanda and we are currently made our Pravesha into the second Khanda. So it's a long way to go. So we got a long way to go over the next several months. Okay. So the Atharva Veda is, so let's again think about Rig Veda. Rig Veda is in Rigs, so Padya. Yajur Veda is in prose, Gadya. Sama Veda is in Ghana. And Atharva Veda is a combination of Padya and Gadya. So verse and prose usually is the combination that you see in Atharva Veda. So let's always think about the Rishi, Devata, and Chandas for this Upanishad. So the first Rishi for all of us is Hayagriva Namaka Paramatma. He is the first Rishi, and he is the one who teaches Chaturmukha Brahma, as we know. So from Chaturmukha Brahma, what happens for this particular Upanishad? You have Atharva, then from after Atharva is Angira, and then Satyavaha, Angirasa, and Shuanaka. So these are all the key acharyas or gurus of this Upanishad. We never forget. So we should always pay our obeisance and thank them for imparting and giving us this knowledge down the generations. And let's always think about all the acharyas who have given us the bhashyas to understand the Mundaka Upanishad. So the chandas for the Upanishad is mostly Anushtup Chandas, and the Rishi for this is Aksharanamaka Paramatma. Okay, so Rishi, Devata, Chandas, Rishi, Akshara is the Devata, Anushtup is the Chandas, and Angirasa is the Rishi for the Mundaka Upanishad, who is having a conversation with Shuanaka, who has approached him and asked him the bigger questions of life. Okay. So that is the structure of the Upanishad. And in Khanda 1 of Mundaka 1, what did we do? We spent about 2-3 months looking at the various verses in the first Khanda. So what I've done here is, and we have looked at this slide before, but just to summarize the key concepts that we have done in the first Khanda. So what was the overarching view? There were 8 key ideas of Mundaka Upanishad in the first Khanda. The first one was the Guru Sishya Parampara, which I've just told you. That was what was summarized. And the Shuanaka goes to Angirasa and says, what is it that I need to know, knowing which means that I've known everything, or what is it that I need to know so that all the yajnas and everything else that I do become meaningful. So at that point, Angirasa talks to him about what is Aparavidya and what is Paravidya. So we spent a lot of time actually understanding the gravity of what Angira is saying here. What is Paravidya and what is Aparavidya? Then we understood that Paravidya is the highest knowledge. The Paravidya is anything that gives you the knowledge of the Akshara. Yeah, is Paravidya. Anything that is outside this is Aparavidya. So that is a broad classification of knowledge. And of course, we looked at the nuances of Para and Aparavidya over 2 or 3 sessions. So go back and have a look at this. But the key idea there is classification of knowledge. Aparavidya, Paravidya. What is Paravidya? Knowledge of Akshara. So then the logical discussion there is, who is Akshara? So at that point, Angirasa said, Akshara is the supreme God, supreme Paramatma. And Angirasa gives him the concept of how to know God, how to understand what is this entity, how does the Vedas describe this being. And then the view there of the Vedic philosophy is that you start from a negative aspect and then you always go to the positive aspect of understanding who the supreme being is. So Angirasa says he is unknowable, but then he also becomes knowable. Yeah, he is unknowable from all your material sense organs, but he is knowable through Paravidya, which can be learned through the Vedas using Brahma Sutra as the rules of interpretation. So when you use Brahma Sutra to understand the Vedas, then you understand who this Akshara is. And understanding that Akshara is the Paravidya. Okay. So next the question is, okay, if he is knowable and if he is understandable through the Vedas, how is he known? How should he be known? Isn't it? That becomes an important question for mundane beings like us. And that is what Angirasa is doing by teaching Shuanaka. We are understanding these key ideas of the Vedic philosophy, and we get into Shuanaka's shoes and understand what is it that Angirasa is teaching. So here the discussion, the fifth concept or the fifth idea is to understand who this Paramatma is, or what is the concept of God that we can relate to and understand. Okay? And Angirasa made it very clear that this Akshara or Brahman or Paramatma or the supreme being should be known as the creator of the universe. That is the basic idea of understanding who the Paramatma is. He who is the creator of the universe, Janmadhyasya Yataha, second sutra of Veda Vyasa in Brahma Sutra, as we know. So we understand this Akshara as the creator of the universe. Then the next question that arises is, if this chap has created the universe, is this created universe real or unreal, or it is something else? And Angirasa's view in Atharva Veda, in Mundaka Upanishad, is crystal clear in his verses, and he categorically establishes that the nature of his real creation, if somebody creates something and you say that he's a great artist, then the art should be real. You don't have an illusory art and then say the creator of this art is great. Yeah, so it doesn't make logical sense. And that we have discussed in so many Upanishads that we have done over the years, that this creation is real. And that is why this creator is Sarvajna. He is omnipotent and he is all knowledgeable. Yeah? So he gives a hint, he gives an idea that the nature of his real creation. And how does he substantiate that? That is the key concept in the last section of the first Khanda. And he said, this creative aspect of Akshara is a conscious act. Tapaha. And he said tapaha there. And we have to do tapas on that word tapaha. What does the tapaha mean? It's a conscious act. You don't get an illusion, consciously say, I want to have an illusion now, so I'll have an illusion. No, illusion is always an involuntary act, whereas a conscious act is always, can never be an illusion. Yeah, it is a conscious act. A thought full of knowledge prompts a well-coordinated creation. So that was the discussion. 8 key points or ideas that are discussed in the first kanda of Mundaka Upanishad. So this is just an introduction. So the other important thing that I wanted to mention here is the Mundaka 1, the first Mundaka with the first 2 kandas is only an introduction to the Upanishad. Okay? The Mundaka 2 and Mundaka 3 are just incredible chapters that talk about the Akshara Namaka. Who is God? What are his natures? What does he do? And so on and so forth is discussed in Mundaka 2 and Mundaka 3, whereas the Mundaka 1 is the prelude. It gives you an introduction. So the first kanda is an introduction to have an overarching view of who this supreme being can be, who is the creator of a real universe. Okay? So the next question is, yeah, it's all well and good having a theoretical knowledge, yeah, about, we do need a theoretical knowledge, yeah. Without theoretical knowledge, you can't do anything. We can't do a practical application. You need, if you want to do a proper practical application, then you need to have the theory and your foundation. It's the theory or the knowledge that gives you the foundation. And if the foundation is firm, everything else flows automatically. On the other hand, if your foundation is a little bit dodgy, then you cannot build a castle on a dodgy foundation. You really need to get your foundation right, and which is what Angirasa has done for us in the first kanda. So then the question, of course, is our Shuanaka, Shaunakohavai Mahashalaha. He is a great performer of sacrifice. And he is very much doing all these karmas and he's doing practical things. And that is the question he asked, right? That what is it that I need to know so that all the practical things that I'm doing, such as yajnas, they become meaningful. So the next kanda then gives you an introduction of how that practical application has to be. And that is what we did just before Christmas. Yeah. So what were the verses that we did so far? Let's just try and recite them. Tade tat satyam mantreshu karmani kavayo yani pashyan tani tretayam bahuda santatani. Tani acharata niyatam satyakamaha yeshavaha pantaha sukrutasya loke. Yada lelayate hi archihi samidde havyavahane tada ajyabhagav antarena ahutihi pratipadaye yasya agnihotram adarsham apurnamasam achaturmasyam anagrayanam atitirvarjitam cha ahutam avaishvadevam avidinahutam asaptaman tasya lokan hinasti. Okay, so beautiful ancient Vedic Sanskrit verses, such beautiful ancient Sanskrit language that we have at our disposal to contemplate, where Angirasa is introducing how to do practical application. So the very first word that we probably need to remind ourselves is in this, the very first line is very significant. Tat yetat satyam. Previously, he said that creator, that you understand this Akshara Namaka Paramatma as a creator of the universe. And immediately when he starts the second kanda, he says, Tat yetat satyam. That one is called Satya. And we've spent 2 classes understanding what is the etymology of Satyam. Satyam means not just real. That is a very colloquial, superficial Sanskrit. That is not what Upanishad is telling us or Angirasa is telling us. Satyam, the etymology of Satyam, as you know, has got various levels of meaning. Satyam can mean Jnanananda Swarupa. Satyam can mean the eightfold cosmic dispensation of the universe by Brahman. Satyam can also mean he who is the controller of jivas in samsara and he who is the controller of jivas in moksha. Satyam is a name of Paramatma in Vishnu Sahasranama. So we need to think about Satyam in an entirely different angle to understand what Angirasa did. And that's what we did for 2 classes to understand Satyam. That Satyam needs to be worshipped. And then he said in the yugas, that the first verse was talking about the yugas, isn't it? You have the Chatur Yugas. So who is going to very, very briefly tell us what are the 4 yugas, please? A very quick contribution. What are the 4 yugas?
Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga.
Thank you, Padmajadi. Beautiful. So he said in Satya Yuga or Krita Yuga, all the jivas, in Satya Yuga, the Veda was one. There is no divisions in Vedas. The Vedas was one, and everybody knew Veda as Paravidya, and everybody knew that the Sarvashabda Vachyatva of Paramatma in Vedas in Krita Yuga. Whereas in Treta Yuga, that levels of knowledge goes down a little. And then in Dwapara Yuga, it goes down even further. And in Kali Yuga, it's hopeless. Yeah, so that is what he's talking about, that there is this, that jivas have lost their approaches to Vedas. And then, of course, we know in the end of Dwapara Yuga, Veda Vyasa takes avatara, then he compiles whatever the Vedas that are left for us to read, which we don't do anyway in Kali Yuga. Yeah. So so that is what he's saying in Mantreshu Karmani Kavayo Yani Pashyan in Krita Yuga. In Krita Yuga, everybody used to, when they do yajna, it will be as a Paravidya. If they read something, that will be in Paravidya. Whereas in Treta Yuga, what happened? Bahuda Santatani, various branches, various interpretations, understanding para and apara and those kind of things happened in the Treta. Okay. But, and then of course that got degraded up to Kali Yuga. But then Angirasa, this is a very, very important verse that is not only applicable to Shuanaka, but it is also applicable even now. Tani acharata niyatam. He who does, even in Kali Yuga, he who does all actions as what? Satya Kamaha. Satya we understood as Paramatma. Kama means what? To please Paramatma, or with a desire, or with the view of offering it as a sacrifice. So those are the 2 ways of looking at Satya Kama. Satya Kama means for God's pleasure, you do things. That means whatever actions you do, you do it as a sacrifice. He who does that, what happens to him? Pantaha sukrutasya loke. That fellow has got some scope for progression. So that he said. So in this verse, Angirasa has given us an idea of how the knowledge, in its highest in the Krita Yuga, it deteriorates during Treta, Dwapara, and Kali. It becomes really hopeless. And then once this yuga is done, then the knowledge is completely destroyed. Then another yuga, then another Divya Yuga starts and the knowledge again comes. So everything is cyclical, right? So that is what we understood from that verse. So then Angirasa said, so if that is the situation, and as I have said, Tani acharata niyatam satyakamaha. So how do you do the yajnas? Shuanaka, you are a big, you have big yajnashalas and patashalas. You are doing yagas that can go on for years. You do yagas with thousands of folks come to your ashrama and they do all these yajnas and so on. So how should you do this yajna? So that is what he's saying. And that we did. It's a beautiful verse. Yada lelayatehi archihi samidde havyavahane. So you have to do he's talking about the fire sacrifice. So there we understood the Agni there is not the material fire. That Agni is not the Agni Devata. That Agni is Agni Narayana. And we understood the etymology of Agni as given in Rigbhashya by Acharya to understand that Agni is the Supreme Paramatma himself. So when you do Agni Upasana, you look at that Agni and think that and put your mind in focusing that fire is Agni Narayana, and you do the sacrifice, you do the prayers or ahutis or whatever you do at that point. So how do you do that? And he gives you visualize the fire. And we also understood that the fire is the supermost pratika in Vedic philosophy. We may have vigrahas in temple. You may have vigrahas at home or deities at home that you may pray. But from a Vedic perspective, fire is the most important pratika or symbol of Paramatma because it is pure and it is light and it is always upward facing and so on. We understood all that from previous sessions. So that Agni, how you should do, he said, Yada lelayate, when the flames are really beautiful. And then he said, that flames should have tongues, and you visualize the eyes of Brahman on the two tongues of the fire, and the mouth is where it's where you do the ahuti and so on. So go back to that slide and understand. So this is purely metaphorical. Yeah. So you just don't go to a temple where our purohits are doing some havan. We all sit around, throw stuff, and then come back and feel that we have done something. Angirasa is saying, please don't do that. Yeah. Challenge your purohit as to what they are doing. Or if your purohit doesn't know what he is doing, at least you read the Mundaka Upanishad and understand what is that Agni and how do you visualize that Agni and how should be your contemplation and meditation on the fire. So that is the second verse. And then in the third verse, he said, these fire sacrifices have got rules. You have to do it in certain forms and so on. That is what he said last time. Okay. So what was it that he said? So yasya lela yada lelayate hi archihi samidde havyavahane tada ajyabaga vantarena ahutihi pratipadayet. He said that, and then immediately he said, when you do such fire sacrifice with contemplation, there are some vidhi and nisheda in the Vedas. The Vedas give us a lot of vidhis. When you have to do, what you have to do, how you have to do, and so on. Those rules are important. It gives you a context and a framework in which you can do your spiritual practice. If you are a surgeon, there is some vidhi, isn't it? There are some rules. You have to put a surgical gown. You have to wash your hands. You have to wear a mask. You have to wear a gloves. You have to be aseptic as much as possible. Then you go and do the job. Yeah. And then you do the job when? At the right time. Yeah. So those are all the things that we do in our mundane lives. And the Vedas also give us exactly the similar approach. You do things properly. So he said, you should, what the way the Angirasa has done here is, if you want to do things properly, you should know how you should not do things. Okay? Because if you do things improperly, they do have consequences. And that is the reason why you should do things properly, is how the next verse goes. Yasya Agnihotram Adarsha Purnamasam. So we did that. So a brief overview of fire sacrifice here. Yajnam, in one view, is fire sacrifice. There are two ways of looking at this fire sacrifice, Smarta and Shrauta. Smarta is those that are ordained in the Smritis. Shrauta is those that are ordained in the Vedas. The ones that are ordained in the Vedas, you will all be familiar with three ones: Garhapatya, Ahavaniya, and Dakshinagni. So those are all the common Vedic Agnis that will be there. Okay? And then for Grihastas, there is also another Agni called Upasana Agni that comes from Vivaha Homa. When you have wedding and you've done the fire sacrifice, that Agni will be passed on to you, which you look after for the rest of your life. We don't, but that was the Vedic system. That was called Upasana Agni. Okay. So this Upasana Agni that comes from the Smarta tradition rituals and the Shrauta rituals where you have the Agnihotra, you have to do them twice daily. That is the rules. That is the vidhi in the Vedic philosophy. Do it twice daily. Yeah. And the people used to do at that point, and that's why our Rishi Angirasa has taken this to instruct people as to how to do that yajna, how to do the Upasanam and Yagnihotra. Okay. And this was done in various times of the day. So the Agnihotra is done twice daily, when just before sunrise or immediately after sunrise and immediately after sunset. Those are the two times when you have to do Agnihotra. So those rules are very clear. So our Angirasa gives when you have to do and how you should not do it. Agnihotra, Adarsha Purna Masa. So the same fire sacrifices you do. Darsha means in Amavase. And Purna Masa means when in the full moon day. In these 2 days, you have to do special yajnas. That is what the Vedic folks used to do. So that is called Darsha Purna Masa. Okay. Then Agrayanam. Agrayanam means when you have a harvest. When you have a harvest, you do a fire sacrifice. That is called Agrayana. Anagrayana means if you don't do Agrayana or if you don't do Darsha Purna Masa. Yeah. And then when you do these yagas, if you don't have guests, Atitir Varjitamsha. Or if you don't do Upasana Yajna, or if you don't do Vaishvadeva. Vaishvadeva is something that most of us do at home, at least in the weekends when we are not rushing for work. We do Vaishvadeva, isn't it? You cook the food and then you offer it to the fire, and then you are offer it to the birds outside in your house, and then you consume the food. That Vaishwadeva we all do. Okay. Avidinahutam, that is vidhis, if you don't follow rules. So what Angirasa said, it's all well and good doing the fire sacrifice with an approach, but you should also ensure that you do these Agni fire sacrifices in these rules. Because if you don't do it, asaptaman lokan hinasti. Okay? So you, for 7 generations, your father, grandfather, great grandfather, yourself, son, grandson, great grandson, or daughter, granddaughter, great granddaughter, grandmother, mother, grandmother, great grandmother, they will incur sin. Is one of the it's a nisheda. It's something to ensure that we do it properly. Or the other way of looking at that 7 is your chance of going to Bhuvarloka, Suvarloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Maharloka, Satyaloka is very, very questionable. You're going to be in trouble if you don't do this properly. You're not going to ascend up in your journey as souls. Okay, so that is what he said. And we stopped at that. Okay, so we spent a good 25 minutes to recap what we have done so far, because that gives us a foundation with regards to what is being discussed next, which is beautiful because look at this, how he has finished. Saptaman lokan hinasti. Sapta means what? 7. Yeah. And then we looked at the Vedic philosophy of 7. And there is so many stuff, so many concepts that Vedas talk about everything in 7. Yeah. Go back to those slides and understand those 7s. Look at these yajnas. Yeah. 7 Paka yajnas, 7 Havi yajnas, 7 yoga, 7 Soma yagas. Yeah. That I'm just giving an example from this slide. But 7, remember that 7, because immediately Angirasa goes into a very scientific mode. He said, you know what, those 7 flames, I asked you to do the fire sacrifice. With the fire sacrifice approach that you have the 2 tongues and the mouth, and you give ajya, the ghee to the 2 tongues and ahuti to the mouth of the fire. In the sense, how do you appreciate that? That the 2 eyes are the eyes of Brahman, and the base, the mouth is the mouth of Brahman. And where you throw the ahutis, the mouth consumes everything. Yeah. So that is that is how you the metaphorical approach to the Supreme's worship. And then here now Angirasa then takes a beautiful verse here. He says, there are 7 flames. You have to worship, you have to do ahuti to the flame. But remember, there are 7 flames, Shuanaka. What are those 7 flames? Kali, Karali, cha Manojava, cha Sulohita, ya cha Sudumravarana, Sfulingini, Vishwaruchi, cha Devi, Lelayamana, iti Saptajihvaha. So Angirasa says, look, there are 7 flames. This is beautiful, yeah. And we can just say literally 7 flames and get on with it. No, our rishis had a deep scientific understanding of what they were doing. When they were doing fire sacrifice, what is it that they were doing in fire sacrifice? Besides thinking about Paramatma, they had also discovered there are 7 colors to flames. Okay. Kali, Karali, Manojava, Sulohita, Sudumravarana, Spulingini, Vishwaruchi. They said there are 7 types of flames or 7 wavelengths of visible spectrum of light, which we know as Vigyar, yeah, violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. The 7 visible spectrum is what the Vedas talk about as the 7 flames of the fire. Very beautifully described in Mundaka Upanishad. And of course, Rig Veda talks about Saptayahvihi, the 7 horses of the sun. Why does the Surya has 7 horses? Because there are 7 visible spectrum of light, which corresponds to the 7 flames of fire. Okay. Sapta Archihi, Saptarchihi, Sapta Jihvaha, they are all synonymous, talking about these 7 wavelengths of light. And how the idea there is, when you do a fire sacrifice, you are transferring energy. You're transferring energy from the flame to the environment where the sun rays are. That is how the transfer of energy happens. And the Vedic Rishi's view there was, by that transference, you are doing good things to the environment. And when good things happen to the environment, good things happen to you. And when good things happen to your sadhana sharira, your jiva, which is inside, will probably do good things. Yeah, so that is how the link actually happens in Vedic philosophy around fire sacrifice. This is the new verse for today. So let's see how you do. We got about 30 minutes. So we got a new verse coming up. So once we have understood those 7 flames, now Angirasa moves to the next level of philosophy. This is really interesting because now we can link up with Gita and understand the journey of souls that we did about 3.5 years ago. Okay. So now Angirasa says, Yeteshu yascharate brajamaneshu yata kalam cha ahutayo hi adadayan tam nayanti yetaha suryasya rashmayo yatra devanam patihi eko adivasaha. So when you split that verse, the meaning is very clear. But let's think about it a bit deeper to understand what is that philosophy that is being discussed here. Yeteshu yascharate brajamaneshu. So he who performs this sacrifice or he who offers oblation into these shining tongues of flames. Yeah. When yata kalam. Yeah. Yata kalam means what? Kalam, we all know kalam means time, right? That is one meaning. At prescribed time. In the previous verse, he said you have to do it sunset, sunrise, you have to do it Agnihotra, Agrayana, and all that. So he who does that at prescribed time. So that is one view of kalam. So kalam there also means kala abhimani devatas. Okay, so I'm going to break for 10 seconds and get folks to think about kala. Okay, who is going to tell us in which Upanishad kala comes? What is kala? In which Upanishad kala is described? And who is going to tell us what that kala is? Who wants to go there? Kala. So kala literally means what kala can mean fence, right? So Shat Prashna Upanishad. Go to the Shat Prashna Upanishad where it talks about the 15 fences in which the jivas operate. Yeah. And there are various kalas, fences that the jivas are the cover or the barriers that the jivas have. And that Shat Prashna Upanishad also talks about the various abhimani devatas of these various kalas. So go back and look at that. Okay. This is really interesting. Why that yata kalam not just means time, but also he who offers this to Paramatma, but at the same time is grateful for all the kala abhimani devatas who help you to reach Paramatma. So the kala abhimani devatas are 15 fences, and the 16th kala is prana tattva, as you know, and then the 17th is Shri tattva, and the 18 is Vishnu himself, the 18th number. So those 18 numbers 6. So in fact, how this links up with this fire sacrifice is one of the most important ahutis that we do even now is offer milk. Yeah, milk is the most important ahuti that is given in various yajnas. Okay, so the stages in which the milk is transported from the cow's udder, how the milk is milk from the cow, how it goes into a vessel, and how that vessel is taken to a place where it is warmed up and made to boil. Once it's boiled, how it is placed on the ground on a table, for example. Wait for the milk to settle down, and that milk is then transferred, and then that comes to the Yajnashala, and then that milk is offered to the fire. So there are 16 stages in this transport. So when this milk was being brought to the Yajnashala, the 16 contemplation of the 16, the kala, the 15 kalas and the prana tattva should happen when that happens. So that is why that yata kalam comes. So that is a bit more deeper level of contemplation of that milk that is poured into the yajna. But what I wanted to say is you don't pour milk just because milk is there. No, from cow to the fire, there are 16 stages that the Vedic rishis have described. And that each stage of that has got an Abhimani Devata. And as you're doing it, you pray to that Abhimani Devata and then approach Vishnu as Agni Narayana. And similarly is how we know in Shat Prashna Upanishad that contemplation comes in. So we got to link both. And when we do that, Yata Kalam becomes very interesting. So, eteshu yascharate brajamaneshu yatakalam cha ahutayo hi adadayan. Yeah. So, at prescribed time, we offer these oblations or ahutis to the tongue and the mouth of the flames. He who does that, okay, go with me on this because the next few slides is beautiful because that gives you the fundamentals here of journey of souls. So in the next line, he says, Tam nayanti yetaha suryasya rashmayo yatra. Okay. He who does the yajna. Okay. So that yajna there, here we are understanding that yajna as a fire sacrifice. But in the subsequent slides, I'm going to just demonstrate that the yajna of Vedic philosophy is not just throwing stuff in the fire. You going to work tomorrow, yeah, you doing your job tomorrow is also a yajna, yeah, and you have to do your yajna as in your professional lives, in your private lives, in your spiritual lives. What is that yajna supposed to be? And if you do that yajna with that perspective, what is that perspective? That ultimately you are offering everything to the Supreme and you are grateful for all the Abhimani Devatas who are looking after your Karma Indriyas, Jnana Indriyas, etc., who actually make it happen for you. So you're grateful for the Abhimani Devatas and then you worship Vishnu and offer everything as a sacrifice to Vishnu. He who does that for the rest of his life, not just once throwing fire with that perspective, but the rest of one's life, he who does that, what happens to him? Tam nayanti yetaha suryasya rashmayo yatra. And again, this is a very metaphorical view. Angirasa actually here says, he who does that type of yajna is led by the deities who are present in the rays of the sun. You just need to, it's a metaphorical thing. Those deities take him. Where? They take him where? Devanam patihi yeko adivasaha. Devanam patihi. Devanam means plural. Patihi means he who is the head of all the devas, devatas. And we know that, right, in Vedic philosophy, Eko devaha sarva bhuteshu gudaha. There is only Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti is one verse in Rig Veda, but there is only one Paramatma. There are all sorts of Abhimani Devatas, a lot of exemplar sentient beings spread all over the universe. They may be Devas, Devatas, but there is only one chap who is the head. So these fellows, these Abhimani Devatas, what will they do if you do your sacrifice properly? They will take you to whom? This Devanam Patihi, okay, Adivasaha, where he resides. They take you to this place where he resides if you do your yajnas properly. Okay, so this is a supremely metaphorical view of how to look at, philosophical view of how you look at the fire sacrifice. Because that is what Krishna talks about in Gita chapter 8, isn't it? So we don't have time to go through this verse, but I'm just giving it to you as a reference in chapter 8, verse 5, 6, 12, 23, 24, 25, 26, where Krishna tells the different folks, the types of jivas, what they do, what kind of routes that they take. Where does he start? Agnihi, Jyotihi, Ahaha, Shukla, Shamasaha, Uttarayanam, Devayanaha, Devanam Patireko Adivasaha. He who does his work, his karma yoga in that spirit, he eventually will go towards Devayana and go to this place where the Supreme Paramatma Vishnu resides, which is what? Moksha. Whereas there is the opposite, which is many of us, yeah, what do they have? What happens to them? Shukla Krishno Gatihi, Dhuma, Ratrihi, Krishnaha, Shanmasaha, Dakshinayinam. And then what happens? Chandramasam, cloud, rain, plants, male's body, a sperm, and then get into the female womb and go to the Mrityuloka. That is the other group. So these fellows may go to Swarga for some time and then come down to earth again. The fellows who don't do their work as a dedication to the Supreme. Okay, so the verse actually is beginning to talk to you about the concepts of Devayana and Pitruyana. Yeah, that the path of light and the path of darkness. Yeah, that Gita talks about in great detail. But you will find in many Upanishads this is described, and that is exactly what Angirasa is talking about in Mundaka Upanishad here. And after all, Gita is a summary of the Upanishads, isn't it? So let's think about this Devayana and Pitruyana. And before I do that, can I just get folks to contribute something as to what their understanding of this Devayana and Pitruyana is, please? So who wants to go there for a couple of minutes?
Madhu, Devayana is the path to like Devas, permanently to heaven. And Pitruyana is going there and then coming back, as you said just now.
Thank you, Sudarshan. Any other contributions or views there? Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, Sudarshan, for that. So let's keep moving these slides. They appear to be a little bit complicated, but you need to keep thinking about these. Yeah,
Is that, sorry, can I come in? I think Devayana is also beyond the, Pitruyana is for the Nitya Samsarins and Devayana is for the Devas. So that is their sort of route to moksha, is how I understood it.
Okay.
From your lectures before.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Devalji. Anybody else?
I think it's also called Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. No?
Yeah.
So
very good. Yeah. Absolutely right, Pratibhaji. Thank you very much for the Dakshinayana and Uttarayana. So
I was. What is this Pravritti Marga, Nivritti Marga takes us to Devayana, and I didn't get the question right, you see.
No,
because Paravidya, Aparavidya, all these I think lead to that, isn't it?
Yeah. So if we understand Paravidya, then we understand how that yajna needs to happen. What Angirasa is saying, if you do the Paravidya, if you do your yajna with Paravidya perspective, then at some point, your journey of souls will be towards Devayana. And what is the final destination of Devayana? Devanam Patireko Adivasaha. Where this Devanam Patihi resides, you reach him. So that is what Devayana is. So stay with me on this. Let's look at the next slide. So this particular verse hopefully will give you what that means. Yeah, Devayana and Pitruyana, as discussed in Mundaka Upanishad. Katha Upanishad also talks about it. We have done those verses before, and I've got some slides here. And then, of course, Gita talks about it in great detail. So what is this Devayana? Let's look at number 2 first before we go to number 1. So Devayana is, let's say we are all doing our satsangs and eventually we practice our professional, personal, our spiritual lives as taught in the Vedic philosophy and as taught in the Vedas. Then what will happen? Yes, we are in this mundane world at this point. We as jivas, inside us is the Antaryaman. We got the Linga Sharira. We've always been like that forever. And in this creation, when the creation happened, what happened? We started getting this Sukshma Sharira and Stula Sharira, which is the gross body. And then we are going through samsara. Okay. And on our Linga Shariras is all these karmic imprints. And these karmic imprints happens when we do our sacrifice or yajnas, not for Paramatma's benefit, but for our own benefit. When that happens, the karmic imprints are there forever in our Linga Sharira. But if we start doing what Angirasa is telling us, where you offer it as a sacrifice, when you do that, you don't get your karmic imprints. Okay, number 1. And also, when you do the true Karma Yoga as described in the Gita, that should eventually lead you to Jnana. And Jnana should lead to Bhakti. And Bhakti should lead to grace. When the divine grace happens, that is when the Linga Sharira goes away. Without that, there is no hope. Okay. He who thinks that he can himself attain moksha, he is not going to have that. That divine grace is fundamental for attainment of moksha. So what is that root? That root is what the Devayana is all about. So we are going through this samsara now and we are making our sadhanas and we are making our progress. Let us say we reach a point where we have become aparoksha jnanins. Yeah, that we have had a direct visualization of the Paramatma himself. That is one aspect. The other aspect is, let us say that we have done lots of punyas and we have done lots of good acts, lot of good sacrifice, lot of things that we have done, that we are ascending up. We are not coming down into this mrityu loka. Okay? So what happens to those jivas who have had that aparoksha jnana? Yeah, or they have no karmas imprints at all because Paramatma has removed that. So they start ascending up. They go up to higher planes of existence. Yeah? And our Vedic rishis call this as Swargaloka. Yeah, Swargaloka, you can say this is still in the material plane. It may not be in this solar system. We don't know where it is. It may be somewhere in this universe. Yeah, higher levels of existence. So we may go to that higher levels of existence. So that together is called Swargaloka. Swargaloka is not a place where only Indra resides with all his apsaras and so on. So that is not the only place. All the Tattvabhimani devatas that is described in the Vedic scriptures, okay, so all these folks, they have a residential area. So their areas together is considered as Swargaloka. Okay. So our Vedic Rishi says that there are two such sentient beings and their lokas. One chap is called Surya and the other chap is called Chandra. Okay. So the jivas that are doing good stuff, they go to Swarga, yes. They will go to Swarga and they will reach Surya Loka where the Surya is. Okay. And from the Surya Loka, they go to Satya Loka. And then they hang out there in Satyaloka until our Chaturmukha Brahma finishes his innings, which is, as you know, millions, billions of years. And when this Mahapralaya happens, then our Chaturmukha Brahma is going to drag us all, take us across the Viraja Nadi, and then we go to Devanam Patir Eko Adivasaha. There we go. Okay, so that is the journey of the Sattvika souls who want to make progress in life. Okay, so this is the journey that it's not my view, it is the Vedic view. This is what the Vedas say. This is the journey of souls. And this path is called Devayana. And the Devayana needs a lot of work. Okay, but then there are many of us, what we do, oh, let me do this havan in the temple, let me invite all my family and friends and let me have a good time. And in the process, I will throw some sacrifice. I'll feel good about it and I've fed some people. Yes, nobody is saying it's a bad deed, but the perspective in which you're doing it is very limited. So the people who do such good acts, actually for their own selfish benefit, for example. So what happens to them? They still reap the benefits of what they have done. Okay, but it's got its own limitations. So this is called Pitruyana. So what that happens there is, so these fellows who have made good punyas, they will, yes, again, they will ascend up. They'll go to the Swargalokas where they can have, like how Nachiketa went to Yamaloka. Yamaloka is Swargaloka, right? Nachiketa went to Yamaloka where he saw, of course, his Yamaduta showed him what happens, but also he saw other things as well. So you do go to Swargaloka, the ones that have done, in inverted commas, from their perspective, good acts, but not in the right spirit. So they will go to Swargaloka, enjoy the benefits of what good acts that they have done. But there is a limitation as to how far they can go to that place. They can go up to Chandraloka, says the Vedas. You can take it literally or you can take it metaphorically. So they will go to certain higher levels of existence. Once that the punya is exhausted, so once that karma, that good karma has been exhausted, then they will have to descend down. So they will go to Chandraloka, and from Chandraloka they will have to descend down either in the Mrityu Loka and go through samsara, or some folks will go to narakas of various types. So they'll go around like this. Some fellows, some one day will do another havan in the local temple, and then again go to Chandraloka, and then again come back. So this is called Pitruyana. So you have Devayana and Pitruyana, and our view should be clear that we want to follow the path of Devayana, which is what Krishna talks about in all the chapters. As you know, 6 to 12, there are lots of discussions about this. Okay. Now here is another, something that I want to burst this bubble. This Surya Loka and Chandra Loka has got nothing to do with Surya Mandala or Chandra Mandala. Okay. This Chandra Mandala is the moon that we have for this solar system. Surya Mandala is this sun that we have for this solar system. We know that there is life everywhere in the universe. There are millions and billions of solar systems, and there are millions and billions of suns, and there are millions and billions of satellites for many of the planets, which we call as Chandra Mandala. Yeah, so this is very, very important for us to understand what is it the Vedas are talking about. They're not saying you will go to the moon and come back. Our Chandrayaan satellite itself has gone to the moon and come back. Yeah, and there is a Aditya one that has gone to the Surya Mandala and apparently orbiting today. Yeah, that is not what the Vedas are talking about. The Vedas are talking about subtle worlds. Yeah, where the sentient jivas can go and then keep their onward journey in souls. Okay? So the journey of souls is two routes. If you do Shreyas as described in Katha Upanishad, you will go towards Devayana and you will go to Devanam Patireko Adivasaha. If you do prayers, you go round and round in circles. So that is the idea there as to how you do the samanvaya of all this. Bring everything together of Krishna, what he said in Gita, Katha Upanishad and so on. They say the same thing. It is only how we kind of understand that makes the difference with all this. So I hope that was helpful to give you a base, some foundation towards Devayana and Pitruyana, not to be taken literally around the Surya Mandala and Chandra Mandala, but actually to think about higher planes of existence. Okay. So look at Katha Upanishad. Maybe we should finish today with Katha Upanishad verses. Always nice to go back of what we have done, isn't it? What did Yama say to Nachiketa in Katha Upanishad? Shatam cha eko cha hridayasya nadyaha. Yeah. Tasam Murdanam Abhiniksutrai eka. Payor urdvam ayan amrutatvameti. Vishwanganya utkramane bhavanti. So he said, there are 101 nadis made. That's what Yama said to Nachiketa. Nadis emanating from the mid portions of the body. 50 on the right, 50 on the left. This is 101 from one perspective. There are, of course, 36,000 and 36,000 that is described in the Vedas. If you take 101, 50 on this side, 50 on this side. There is one at the top of your head called Sushumna Nadi or Brahma Nadi. That is one. Okay. So he said, he who has done Shreyas, he who has done the sacrifice as described by Angirasa in Mundaka Upanishad, what will happen to him? Krishna says that in his last Janma, and when the soul departs from his last birth, if the soul departs through the Sushumna Nadi or Brahma Nadi, Tasam Murdanam Abhinis Srutaika. The one that goes through this one nadi upwards. What is that? The journey of souls upwards. That is the Devayana. Yeah. Yeah. And what happens to that person? Tayor Urdvamayan. He goes upwards. There is no coming down at all. He keeps going upwards and reaches where? Amrutatvameti. What is that Amrutatvam? Devanam Patihi Reko Adivasaha. That immortal Vaikuntha is what Katha Upanishad talks about, right? And then we have also understood in that Katha Upanishad there are 11 openings that's given there, isn't it? Puram Ekadvashadvaram Ajasya Akrechasaha. Yeah, so this 11th is called Sushumna Nadi. But he said, Vishwanganya Utkramane Bhavanti. The souls that depart from all other nadis, when we die, okay, the Vedic philosophy is clear. When we die, our soul needs to exit. And there are several pores in our body through which the soul can exit. Okay. And these are all described as nadis. There are so many of them. The only one that will take you to Devayana is if you go through the Sushumna Nadi. And that Sushumna Nadi means it's a whole lot of practice, spiritual practice that you have to do. If you exit from any of the other nadis, what happens? Vishwanganya Utkramane Bhavati. Go round, round in circles. Path of darkness or ignorance. Okay. So Katha Upanishad also talks about the same thing. Okay. So now let's finish off with this easy verse today. So assuming we are doing our yajnas, our sacrifice, and we don't have time today, but next week we'll take up this overarching view of what the yajna that Angirasa is talking about. What is that yajna? Is it just throwing fire, throwing stuff into the fire? No, it's lots of other things that we do in our mundane lives is also yajna. So we are going to have an overarching discussion of that in the next session. But now here, when such a person who is actually departing through the Sushumna Nadi or Brahma Nadi and he is making that journey, Devayana, what is happening? I told you the previous verse, what happened? He said, Tam nayanti etaha suryasya rashmayo yatra devanam patireko adivasaha. He said these devatas, these abhimani deities, they carry you, they take you to the devanam, they take you upwards. How do they take? This is another beautiful visualization. This is all to encourage folks that how nice it is going to be for us if we do this kind of a practice of life. And Angirasa says, for those folks who are doing that, the journey towards the rays of sun or the Devayana, yehi iti tam ahutayaha suvarchasaha suryasya rashmibir yajamanam vahanti priyam vacham abhivadanti archayantyaha yeshavaha punyaha sukruto brahmalokaha. So Angirasa says, for those who do this, the Abhimani Deitas are the deities, which is Rudra, Chaturmukha, Prana, Saraswati, Bharati, Agni, Shanmahishis, Indra, Varuna, you name all the Tattvabhimani Devatas. So you need to know those Tattvabhimani Devatas. Who is going to do that? That is why in certain schools of Vedantas, knowing the Devatas and the Devata Taratamyas and Tattvabhimani Devatas become very important and very useful. Because what do they do as we progress? They say, Ehi, come. Let me take you to the loka of Vaikunta eventually. And as they do that, they talk nice things to these jivas. The radiant deities, having received the oblations, carry the sacrifice with the rays of the sun, honoring and welcoming him with pleasant words. Come to the world of Brahman, earned by your good deeds. That is what the Vedas say, that the Tattvabhimani Devatas do it. Yeah, you can take it literally, or you can take it very metaphorically as something that incentivizes jivas to make the journey. Because these devatas are going to hold their hands and they're going to praise you and talk nice things about you and take you to this Brahman. Yeah. So again, I just want to finish off by giving you this idea of something called Arthavada. Okay. So Arthavada is a very common way of approaching philosophy. Okay. So when we did Tattu Samanvayat in Brahma Sutra, how do you do Samanvaya of Shastras? So there were Tatparya Lingas, Arthavadas, and all those ways of interpretation of the Vedas. So this one is called Arthavada. Arthavada means it's got four. Gautama gives the definition of the Arthavada in Gautama Sutra. What is this? Stuti, Ninda, Parakruti, Purakalpa iti Arthavadaha. So four things. Stuti means what? Praising. Ninda means what? Censuring. Parakruti means somebody who has done some great deed and showing that as an example. A Purakalpa, somebody who has done a bad deed and has fallen down. So Vedas and Upanishads will give you various examples to try and incentivize us to make the journey towards Devayana. Okay, so this verse is a good example of Arthavada, where it talks about that stuti. Yeah. Yehi iti tam ahutaya suvarchasaha suryasya rashmibihir yajamanam vahanti. Look at that yajamanam. Yajamana and yajamani, they always go together, called as yajamanam. What is the number in Vedic philosophy for yajamanam? Who's going to tell us very quickly? What is that number for yajamanam, who is doing the sacrifice? We have done this.
18.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. So yeah, and that is what the Yajamanam. So you got the Ritviks, right? There are 16 Ritviks And then you have the Yajamana and Yajamani who form the 16 and the 17. That's 18 is the complete view of Vedic philosophy. And here it says, your Yajamanam will be taken. You fellows who do all this work in your life as Karma Yoga, if you do that Karma Yoga properly, then you make the journey towards Devayana. Okay. So then, of course, the question there becomes is what happens to those who do sacrifice without dedication to Vishnu? Mechanical stuff that we do quite often, which becomes an apara vidya, isn't it? So what we will do is next week, we will take this verse before we go to understand what is it that happens to folks who just do mechanical things. No use going to the temples, I'm afraid. Just doing mechanical things is what Angirasa is saying. Okay. The same thing Krishna is also talks about here. And again, Krishna gives a Atharvana there. Saha yajnaha prajaha srishtva purovacha prajapatihi. Yeah, 3rd chapter, 10th verse. Yeah, that is again a Atharvana, where he talks about the yajnas. Yeah. So what we will do is we will understand the universal application of yajna. What on earth is it? It is not just throwing stuff into the fire. It is all sorts of activities that we do is yajna. And how do we approach that? What is that universal application of yajna? And then we will go to the verse that talks about karma and so on. Okay. So these are amazing verses that will give us a firm grounding of how to understand, for example, the second half of chapter 2, which we are doing at this point in our Gita Chintana, or the 3rd chapter of the Karma Yoga, which we will be doing in the future, how we need to approach the Karma Yoga that Krishna or Veda Vyasa is talking about, which is a summary of all the things that various Upanishads such as Mundaka Upanishad is teaching us. Okay, so join me next Sunday to take this overarching view of yajna, sacrifice, karma yoga, and how that can lead us towards Devayana that Angirasa and Krishna is talking about. Okay, so on that note, let's close today's session. As you know, there's lots and lots of slides coming up. Krishna Pranamastu, and any Q&As that we have, we can take it up at this point.
Madhu.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, people, maybe I want you to do a session, how to change, you said like people doing mechanically and people doing without attachment. So I know that I'm doing mechanically. I want to detach myself. What should I do? Maybe a class on that, please.
Yeah, sure, Sudarshan. I'm sure we can do a workshop on that. So that is where the whole process of Shravana, Manana, and Dhyana comes in, right? So Shravana and Manana. So first we need to do that. Shravana and Manana, get the knowledge base firmed up. Once the knowledge base is there, then putting that into practice is probably what Sudarshan you're talking about. So yeah, thank you, Sudarshan. Yeah, we should certainly do that. Devalji.
Can you go back to the slide where you show the Swargaloka and Chandraloka? Yeah, that one. Yeah. So my question is, here on the left-hand side, you have shown a jiva, which is, it looks like it has shed all its karmas. So my question is so the grace has to happen in Mrityuloka for you to go towards Satyaloka, is what my question is. Or is it decided in the Swargaloka?
Yeah, so a great question, Devalji. But actually, the grace happens the grace is always there. Yeah, if the grace is not there, you and me are not alive. If the grace is not there, we don't have a body. So the divine grace is there with us all the time. But that specific divine grace that is being described here is where you don't come back and go into this samsara again, of going round in circles in Mrityuloka, for example. And when is that going to happen? That is going to happen when you have exhausted all your karmas. If you have any karmic imprints, you're going to do this. Yeah. So this destruction of karma, which is called karma kshaya. Yeah. So there is this 4th pada of Brahma Sutra that talks about karma kshaya, of how the karmic imprints are destroyed. And that destruction of the karmic imprints that is there in the Linga Sharira happens when the divine has given you this special grace where he actually shows himself to you. That is called aparoksha jnana. or sakshatkara, where you actually see or where you actually get the real knowledge of the Brahman who is inside you as your Antaryami. Yeah, you and me at this point, this is all currently what we are doing is paroksha jnana. It's a lot of theory, a little bit of practice. But what that Paramatma is, you and I have to individually experience, because until we experience, we don't know who that Paramatma is. But to get to that stage is what you're doing, your preparation, by doing all the satsangs and studies and so on, and practicing your life so that you don't incur future karmic imprints. Nobody can exhaust karmic imprints themselves, okay? That is another view that is coming up in subsequent slices. If you say that you will do karma and exhaust karma, you can never do, because every time you do karma, you're born, you will incur karmas that will take you for another 10 lives. So you will never be able to exhaust karma. The karmic imprints have to be totally demolished. And that can happen only at the stage of aparoksha jnana. So that aparoksha jnana happens to all these jivas who are in mrityu loka, in the material plane, in the gross existence like this earth, where we do our sadhanas. Whereas the deva lokas, if you so, I think what you're asking in deva lokas, and many of these abhimani devatas who are there, they are already aparoksha jnanins. Yeah. All abhimani devatas, tattva abhimani devatas are already aparoksha jnanins of various depths. Okay. They perform their roles as a sacrifice. And that is again going to come next. The tattva abhimani devatas are doing sacrifice. They don't incur any karmic imprints. They do their job because that has been directed by Paramatma, says the Vedas. So when you go to Swargaloka, if you have Yama who is sitting there, okay, the Yama is an aparoksha jnanin. Indra who is sitting there, he is an aparoksha jnanin. The Chandra who is sitting in Chandraloka is an aparoksha jnanin. Okay. Whereas you and me, we are of a different category of souls. That is a particular view of a particular type of Vedanta. Yeah. We are a different category of souls. We are the lowest of the sentient beings. All right. We may think we are big chaps in our professional lives, but the basic position is we are the lowest of the sentient beings out there. And the formula that is being given for us to make progress is this. So in the Mrityu Loka, we do our sadhanas, then we exhaust our karmas. And we don't have any karmas, and we are aparoksha jnanins. And when that situation has happened, then we make our ascent upwards and never come back. Surya Loka, Satya Loka, and to Vaikuntha. Okay. But if we still have karmic imprints, we'll do this. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So the whatever the karma kshaya, which is what you're talking about, that aspiration has to be done in samsara.
Correct. Sadhana, that is why we have been lucky and we have been given the sadhana sharira to do that.
Yeah.
That also
Okay.
we don't do. 99.9999% of us don't do it. But that is what the Veda says. You use your sadhana sharira to good use. And if you do that, then you might get somewhere.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Any other questions? Excellent. So if there are... Sorry, go for it.
Not a question, but a comment. It's very nice where you are saying Surya Mandala is different from Surya Loka and Chandra Mandala different from Chandra Loka. That was very nice. The Splingi fire, if you notice in Vaisati, the Acharya actually used Vispulinga, the sparks of the Sankarshana Agni. So it's very, very nice that he has used the Shruti word there directly. So I wanted to just comment on that.
Beautiful, Venkiji. Thanks for that insight. Wonderful. Yeah. Nice, guys. Yeah, take care. So if there are no further questions, could I request, let's take Harish Ji today to take us through the Omkara that we close today, please.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna. Stay safe. We'll catch up again next week. And then following week, we have our Gita Chintana that Anandji is going to conclude the part C of chapter 2. So we got the next 2 weeks lined up. So see you next week for another episode of Mundaka Upanishad. Hare Krishna. Take care, everyone.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Hare Krishna, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.